Dana White was talking about John Jones, and Dana White said John Jones is a freak of nature. And then Dana elaborated on why he said that. And a lot of it he was saying, look, John goes out a lot. John's been known to party. I mean, Dana's not speaking out of school. This is very well known. John will let you know. John isn't always in the practice room the most times, and John isn't always the most dedicated. John's a freak of nature. Guys have come and gone that like to have a good time in their spare time, like John Jones, but their careers are short. They're a little bit of a flash in the pan. John Jones was the youngest UFC champion of all time. I believe that made him 22 years of age. If I'm wrong, he was 23. John Jones is now 33, still around and starting to make claims that he wants to be here for another 10 years. Even tipped his hat to his nemesis, Daniel Cormier, and said, Daniel Cormier at this point in my career is an inspiration. He's an inspiration because he is doing right now what I want to be doing at that point in time. Dana's right. You got to be a freak of nature to be able to do that. But John's not the only freak that came along, and it made me start thinking, who are some other freaks of nature? I came up with Dan Henderson. Used to train with Dan for wrestling. My very first day of mixed martial arts class, I'm in there with Dan Henderson. I knew a chiropractor who worked on Dan Henderson. Dan Henderson was like 25 years old. Chiropractor said Dan Henderson had the neck of an 80-year-old man. Dan Henderson used to not be able to move. Like if I'd walk in the room and Dan's back is to me, and I said, hey, Dan, to look at me, he'd have to like turn around. Oh, hey, Chael. And this was a normal thing. He'd be getting ready to fight for world championships. He didn't have like an injury at that time. He was just this really stiff guy. Like Dan was the opposite of flexibility. Any coach, any trainer that looks at you and tells you that it's about balance and strength and speed and coordination and flexibility. Anyone that throws flexibility into the list has never met Dan Henderson. And quite frankly, I'll throw myself into that. I don't really know why people are really working too much on this flexibility business either, but the point is he was a freak of nature. And Dan was also one of these guys and Dan worked plenty hard, by the way. Dan Henderson worked plenty hard. He didn't work near as hard as he thought. I have been in training camps with Dan where he is the last one to show up and the first one to leave, but then we'll sit and talk to you and be very serious about how he's going to win this next fight because he deserves to win the fight because of how hard he has worked and how much he has sacrificed. And he is bound and determined to make sure that hard work and that sacrifice pays off. And he will be dead serious. It's like, Dan, I see you every day. You're late every single day and you leave early every single day. Like he would tell, but he believed it. If you've ever heard the expression, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. If you've ever heard that expression, even if it's used in humor, there's a lot of truth to that. Something does become very true to you if you believe it to be true. Dan Henderson was a freak of nature. George St Pierre would have to be on this list. Now, not for the same reasons, okay? George worked his ass off. Still does to this day for reasons unknown, unless he really is planning to come back. But George works his ass off. And George lives a pretty clean lifestyle. So not for the same reasons, but George St Pierre was one of these guys from a pure athletic standpoint. When you watch that guy as an athlete, you would just have to stand back and go, is there anything he can't do? If you threw George St Pierre a ball and told him you have 6 months and you're going to be suiting up for the Lakers, you better bet your ass he will be ready to start for the Lakers within 6 months. And you could just go through the game. Hey, George, you're going to be on the Canadian Olympic team this year for swimming. Championships in 13 months, and we expect a medal. Bet your ass George is going to bring you home a medal. He was just one of these weird freak of nature athletes. He just had the speed. He just had the strength. He just knew how to compete. He just knew how to scout opponents. He just knew how to come up with a plan. He just knew how to talk to the right people and get the right advice and get himself in the right headspace. George St Pierre was a freak of nature. Yoel Romero makes it out of Cuba the first time. The term makes it out of Cuba means he made a world or Olympic team. They put him on an airplane and they take him to the world or Olympic championships and he had to leave Cuba. Yoel Romero makes it out of Cuba for the first time at 18 years old, brings home a medal. Yoel Romero did that at 185 pounds. He was 18, he is now 44. Yoel Romero still weighs 185 185 pounds. Ask yourself a simple question. Do any of you weigh today what you weighed 20 years ago? If you guys aren't even 20 yet, so you couldn't weigh that, okay, great. Do any of you weigh today what you weighed 6 years ago? Yoel Romero, at 18 years old, competed and won medals for Cuba at 185 pounds. Yoel Romero will be fighting for another gold award, a belt, at 44 years at 185 pounds. And by the way, without a warm-up and while wearing jeans, hit a backflip on stage in a dance-off with Izzy Adesanya 5 days ago and then dropped into the splits. There is no my friend's daughter is in training for the 2024 Olympics right now as a gymnast. She is a teenage girl. She would never, and I asked her this. I actually asked her this question. Hey, Misha, would you ever attempt a backflip without warming up? And she's like, heavens no. My coaches would be I would never do that, for one, because I would hurt myself, but my coaches would not even allow me to. Okay. Hey, Misha, would you ever attempt to do the splits, just drop into the splits while wearing blue jeans on some random day? She's like, no, of course not. First off, I'd hurt myself. And second, my coaches would be furious. And third, how are you going to do the splits in blue jeans? Yeah, okay, Mish, I understand that and good luck with your dreams, but I just saw a 44-year-old do all of those things at once. Yoel Romero is a freak of nature. Brock Lesnar, without question, qualifies as if Brock Lesnar had 3 fights under his belt when he went and fought for a world championship, which, oh, by the way, he won. Oh, and of those 3 fights that he had, one of them was a loss. He didn't even win the damn fight. I don't think he made it out of the very first round. It was with Frank Mir when he got knee barred. I was there live, and I'm trying to remember, was that the first round or the second round? I think it was 4 minutes into the very first round. Point is, 3 fights in, one of them a loss. He becomes the world champion. Brock Lesnar qualifies as a freak of nature.